Kentucky Senator and Republican presidential candidate Rand Paul joins me live from Des Moines, Iowa. Thank you so much for talking to us. First, I want to talk to you about the breaking news we're hearing now, that the female suspect and the wife who came from Saudi Arabia, she is Pakistani, had, before this attack, actually gone on Facebook and pledged allegiance to ISIS. And she was allowed into this country on a fiancé visa. There are many loopholes in this story, and this is just the beginning.
You know, this is precisely why I introduced an amendment yesterday in the Senate that would put a pause on all immigration from countries that have radical Islamist movements. I think, we spend hundreds of billions of dollars defending this country, but if we're not going to defend our border, I don't think we're really serious about this. About 40% of the 11 million people here in the country illegally have overstayed their visas. Until we know who has overstayed their visas, whether any of them are from the Middle East, I think we need to put a pause on immigration from the Middle East.
Let's talk about the legislation that you are introducing in Washington. Essentially, you want to make it legal for someone to enter the district with a concealed weapon, that permit should be allowed because those in Washington are obvious targets. This is an obvious fact. Does the president acknowledge that?
I think it's twofold. I want to defend against people who might come here from the Middle East, but then I also want to allow U.S. citizens to defend themselves. The D.C. chief of police said last week that if you see an armed gunman and you're part of the public, you need to be prepared to take them down. The problem is in D.C. it's very hard to own a gun, and it's impossible to have concealed carry. So what I'd like to do is let D.C. know that we are going to have self-defense in D.C. The District of Columbia, by the Constitution, is under the jurisdiction of Congress, and so I think that self-defense is a good way to try to stop terrorism, and I'm for more of it.
Okay, many Senate Democrats, as you know, are pushing against this. But I have to point out that California Senator Barbara Boxer, in fact, yesterday pointed out that our nation's capital is a target. Listen to this first, then I'll have you react.
D.C. has its own unique needs. We know how many diplomats come here. We know the rest. It's quite different. We are a definite target.
But despite acknowledging that, she did say one day after San Bernardino shooting assaults that, in fact, the gun laws in California were working. Clearly, they were not. And gun control laws is the central issue behind all of this, because every time we have a mass shooting, which, by the way, there have been more in the year of 2015 than there have been days this year thus far, the president immediately comes out and addresses the fact that we need stricter gun laws and stricter background checks.
In California, they have the most stringent gun laws of any state in the union. And so I don't think that stricter gun control will do anything other than keep the hands out of those who need guns for self-defense or law-abiding citizens. So I don't think more gun control is the answer. I do think, though, we need to look at the immigration from the Middle East, and that's why my amendment would have said, let's put a stop to it for now until we can figure out who's already in this country and whether they wish us harm or not.
To the gun control advocates who are going to argue that your proposal could potentially be inviting more potential violence in this country, let's speak to them for just a moment before I let you go. You are not proposing that senators and congressmen and those in Washington who are obvious targets bring in loaded assault rifles and long guns. We're talking about handguns, concealed carried handguns. I also want to point out the fact that among the 14 victims in San Bernardino, California, there were at least 7 parents there. And I can tell you now, as a mother, if I had somebody pointing a gun in my face who was willing to rob my children of their mother, you can bet I would want a concealed weapon on me to protect myself, as I should under the Second Amendment.
I'm a huge believer not only in the Second Amendment, but in self-defense. I think that all of our commercial pilots should be armed. I think that we should encourage concealed carry in all the states and the District of Columbia. I think you should be recognized if you're traveling from one state to the other, that if your state allows concealed carry, they shouldn't arrest you for having concealed carry in a neighboring state. So I'm all for self-defense. I think it lets the attackers know that if they want to come to attack us in this country, that we will kill them and that we will defend ourselves.
Senator Rand Paul, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.